Welcome to episode 11 of The Winner's Circle, a drag racing podcast. I'm your host, Leroy Lease. Our goal is to help you win more rounds at the track by sharing tips and tricks. This episode is brought to you by DragTracker.com, an online logbook serving the racing community through tools and technology. For this episode, we're going to dig in on troubleshooting strategies. My dad is an excellent troubleshooter, and he and I talked about some strategies for figuring out what's going on with your hot rod. You know, you can't just show up every week and not have something going on. A lot of times there's things that you need to figure out. So we're going to dig in on that, and I'm going to share some of what we've figured out over the years. But before we dig in, I want to encourage you to check us out at DragTracker.com. On the right side of the website is a voicemail link. If you click that link, you can leave me a voicemail and share stories or questions for a future topic on the show. Also, to leave a comment about this episode, go to DragTracker.com/podcast, click on episode 11. There you'll find a transcript with links and show notes. And then finally, we put out a YouTube version of every episode, so you can check us out on YouTube. That's a lot of fun. You can feel free to leave a comment and interact with us there. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/dragtracker. And then also we're on Stitcher Radio, which is really cool because it's content. It's this content about drag racing strategies, how to win at the track. And, they're launching cars, or they're putting out cars, brand new cars that have Stitcher Radio is already part of the radio system, so you can get us in your car. So check us out there if you want. They have an Android and iPhone apps, and you can subscribe to us there. I haven't brought this up lately, but I would really appreciate if you can leave us some feedback, preferably positive. Give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating or whatever on iTunes. This will help us to get visible to people who are looking for drag racing podcasts. You know, I know we only do an episode once a month, but we've been pretty consistent now. We're coming up on our year anniversary, and hopefully we've gotten a lot of good feedback just through the bulletin boards and stuff. But, you know, if you could leave us some feedback on iTunes, that'll just help us stay visible and get in front of other people who are interested in learning more about how drag racing works. But anyway, thanks so much. All right, so I've got some strategies for troubleshooting that I want to share with you. And, you know, for those of you who have been racing or are familiar with our racing operation, this year has been the pits. We've run into some things that just ended up making it so that the engine we were running, we couldn't really afford to keep troubleshooting it. We were just running out of cash. We've got a family budget, that kind of thing. And so we decided to put in an older engine that's tried and true, and it fired right up, and we're ready to go racing again. But there was a lot of struggle with we would try new things. You know, we had a new engine, so we were trying a new fuel pump, and my dad and I were talking about it, and he and I, of course, have raced together for a very long time, and he said, you know, we really got to apply the 60-30-10 rule here. And I was kind of like, wow, in all our years racing, we never worded it that way. What are you talking about, 60-30-10? And he said, well, look, anytime you change a part on a race car and then it doesn't work the way you expected, there's a 60% chance that it's directly because of the part you changed. There's a 30% chance that it's something related to making that change, and then there's a 10% chance that has nothing to do with it. It's just a coincidence. So we started applying this to things that we were doing, like when we changed out the fuel pump. Now we had some float bowl issues, you know, and then they weren't seating. The needle and seat, it had pushed past, and was that because of the fuel pump, or was it because we needed new seats? You know, those things wear out. So, you know, there were all these things. It wasn't idling right. It was fat on the starting line. Which things were the causes and the effects? So we started doing this 60-30-10 strategy. And what's interesting is that starts to give you confidence. It ends up being about confidence. It gives you confidence to go, well, we just changed out the spark plugs, and now I'm having trouble getting it idle. To idle, maybe I put the spark plug wires back on the wrong cylinders. That would cause some misfiring. It might not be detectable at idle, but now at a higher RPM, depending on which two you crossed. So there's a 60% chance that it's something like that. 30% chance that it's something to do with maybe the distributor. Maybe you pulled wires completely off and now you didn't put them back on exactly right. And even though, that wasn't the part you changed, it wasn't the spark plugs, it's related because it was something that was affected by it, right? There's a 30% chance that it's that. And then if it still won't idle, maybe 10% is because there's a weather front moving in. It has nothing to do with what you did to the car, but it's a 10% chance that the reason you're seeing what you're seeing is because of something completely unrelated. So we try to apply that, and it makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. I think that that's a good strategy for troubleshooting. It's like you can be pretty sure that if you just change something and the car's not running the same as it was, let's spend a lot of energy. Let's spend 60% of the amount of time we would spend troubleshooting this problem on things that are directly related to it. But here's something that maybe could happen that isn't that would be deceptive. So let's say you changed out a camshaft. When you change out a camshaft, that's a fairly big thing, but there are a lot of things related to it that could be affected if you haven't done your math. So if let's say you have a catastrophic failure, well, there's a 60% chance it's directly related to this new camshaft. And so a catastrophic failure would be the engine, basically blows up. So something like that would be, a valve hits the piston top. Like you didn't check all of your clearances on your, valve to piston clearance. Maybe, your rocker arms, you should have changed the ratio. Maybe there's some reversion going on. Maybe now you're starting to lean out. So you had a detonation problem or pre-ignition. That would be something that is directly related and it results in catastrophic failure. But what if it was something like you have a water leak? It could be the water pump. It could be that water is leaking out and it's because you had to remove the water pump to get the camshaft in and out. Now you've created a new problem. It's not exactly the part you changed, but it's related because obviously putting a new water pump on or putting a water pump back on with gaskets and stuff, there's a chance you're going to have a water leak, and you kind of go, how did this happen? Well, it kind of makes sense. It's related to what you're doing. It was part of what was touched, but not exactly directly because of the camshaft and what it's doing to the engine. It's peripheral. It's related. And then, you get a flat tire. Well, obviously you're not going to spend any time blaming the camshaft change for a flat tire, but it's funny how sometimes these things all kind of cluster together. That actually reminds me of one time when I lost the brakes. The brakes went out. It had nothing to do with the fact that we had been working on the car the previous week. We hadn't touched the brakes. It had nothing to do with the brakes. They just gave up. What we had been working on was the shifter cable. And so now when the brakes went out, I didn't have a way to downshift. That happened to be two problems that snuck up at the same time, but the brakes going out had nothing to do with the things that we had been working on. So, but I was aware of the shifter cable, so I was able to find other evasive sort of maneuvers to help get the car slowed down. So that's one whole big sort of topic, 60, 30, 10. And so I like applying that. And I apply that to everything. I mean, I apply that to how I deal with the kids. If they're very quiet in their room for a long time, there's a 60% chance they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, right? I have little kids, so I don't know about teenage kids, but it's funny. You start to see this pattern emerge in a lot of different places. But then, so that's one whole strategy. Another strategy that is something to at least keep in mind is, because it's hard to apply it. It's kind of one of those things where you kind of look at it and you go, oh, that makes sense. But let me paint a picture of a scenario for you. So let's say I run 10.5-inch slicks and I'm just not getting consistent traction. A troubleshooting, you would go, well, let's troubleshoot why we're not getting traction. Well, we don't have wide enough slicks. Well, maybe, it certainly wouldn't hurt to put 14 inches or 16 inches of rubber to the pavement. That tends to give you better traction just on its own, but maybe there's something you could do in the short term, like lower the tire pressure. Maybe the tire's ballooning up and you're not putting as much of the rubber to the pavement. On 10.5-inch slicks, you're probably only putting 9 inches of rubber down because the tire gets narrower and taller, and so you don't get all 10.5 inches. So maybe if you put a little less air in the tire, maybe you could get some more traction. Well, that would be a short-term solution. That's short-term troubleshooting. When it's real hot and sticky, you don't want to get too little air in your tires, but it may help you solve it in the near term. In the long term, you might look at tubbing the car out with full-size, slicks or whatever. I'm just saying, if you have a problem with getting traction, there's two different ways you look at it. There's one way where you look at it short-term, where you go, well, I'm going to change the things I can change, like complain to the track management that they aren't putting down that they aren't taking care of the track, or making sure I'm getting in the right groove, that I'm not getting into somebody's oil that just went down the track. These are all short-term solutions. Make sure that I have the right amount of air in the tires. Make sure I have a good compound of the tire so that it's as soft and sticky as it can be. Then there's long-term solutions, which are change the whole car setup. Get ladder bars, tub it out, get bigger slicks, those kind of things. So when you go up to somebody, if you're sitting around talking with your buddies, man, how can I get more traction? Well, these are the kind of things you talk about. You talk about short-term solutions and you talk about long-term solutions. And it applies to everything. I mean, I remember going to a race and there was a guy walking around with a head gasket. He had blown a head gasket and he was just walking around basically asking people if they had a head gasket for his whatever it was. It was like a 4-cylinder engine. Anyway, nobody had a head gasket, but he was looking for a short-term solution because he had to drive the car home, right? So he probably didn't care. He probably would have made it out of rubber gasket material if he just needed something to put in the car to drive it home. Anyway, that was a short-term solution, not a long-term solution. So I don't know if this is making a whole lot of sense, but there are intentional strategies and thought patterns for when you're doing short-term troubleshooting, or long-term troubleshooting. So for instance too, sometimes, I've said before that we run an alternator when we're running. And so I'm charging the battery. Sometimes I will turn the alternator charging off during the run. So what happens when we lose an alternator belt? Well, we don't take a charger to the track, and we have no way of charging it. Well, I have a couple options. One, I don't run out of battery for a couple runs usually, so I know that I can go a couple rounds and not be in any trouble. But I also take backups of alternator belts, and I also have alternator brackets that are different lengths to accommodate even other belts that I have. So I have one or two backup belts, but then I also have different lengths, other size fan belts that I could put on, and the way I would make them work is to just use another bracket to change the angle of the alternator to be able to use these bigger belts. My point is, I've got short-term solutions. Now, I would put everything back to my favorite setup of my favorite bracket and whatever, my favorite size belt when I got home, but as a short-term solution, I've got options. So that's just another example. But I guess I'm curious. So I've just mentioned we've had a lot of trouble with we built this big engine, high horsepower engine. We've had a lot of trouble just tuning it. Have you had any trouble this year? What's going on with your hot rod? Have you been able to get out? I find there are a lot of things that seem to get in the way of being able to be consistent out there. And anyway, I'm just curious about any other racers having any other trouble, whether it's tuning or suspension or what's plaguing you these days. How's your 2014 race season going? So anyway, if you get a chance, leave us a video comment or a comment. You can tweet us, let us know how it's going for you. That'd be great. In the last couple of episodes, we've done a feature that I really enjoyed called pit etiquette. and we got some great responses from people, and we included those in the shows. Go back and check those out if you get a chance. A lot of fun there. But this one's kind of pit etiquette. Well, not really. This one's just a fun story I kind of thought of or was reflecting on from my past. In Maryland, when we would race at Capitol Raceway, and actually I think I saw this happening at 7580. I don't know if anybody remembers that track. I know it's come and gone a couple times in the last 30 or 40 years. Anyway, I went to Bristol for the NHRA Thunder Valley Ford Nationals a couple of weeks ago, Father's Day weekend. Really had a great time, and I was sitting in the stands with a buddy who had never been to the races before, and we're kind of looking around and taking it all in. It's an amazing experience to be there. It's so loud in the Thunder Valley. But anyway, and he kind of sees that there's this group of people over to the side, and they're waving $20 bills in the air. And he's kind of like, what do we have here? What's going on? And I said, there's some people gambling, and they're picking who they want, to win, what lane they want to see win. It kind of was cool because when my dad and I would race, and he was driving in the 90s or whatever, I was a young man, and I remember Dad would go rounds, and let's say, a 7-round race, he would he won of sometimes, but let's say he went out 5th round, semifinals, and, as I was too young. The memories that I'm thinking of were when I was too young to go up and stand by the car while he did the burnout. So I was behind the fence next to the grandstands. And in the stands, there would be somebody who would say, to me, "Hey, kid, good job. It was a good night," and kind of wink or whatever with a big cigar in his mouth or something. And I was a little kid, probably 11, 12 years old. So I'd give him a thumbs up and run back to the to the pits to meet my dad there. And I never really thought about it a whole lot. But these are people who bet on Dad and won a lot of money. Basically, they thought he was a good horse to bet on. And I don't know. There was just something fun about it. I don't see it as a threatening thing. I don't have a problem with it in the stands. I don't, whatever. It's part of it. It's good times. Now I think about it, I'm pretty sure I've seen groups like that at MIR. And that's an ihra track in Maryland, Southern Maryland, and I've seen it. Well, I saw it at Emerald Coast Dragway there. Probably seen it in Knoxville Dragster. So I'm pretty sure that every track has this section that's, they'll have a section over here. It's family section, and then they have the section over here where there may be some rowdy people, and probably have some people who put their money on red or black, if you know what I mean. So, anyway, it's cool. Not really a pit etiquette thing, but I thought about it lately. And a lot of times we do a story part, and I thought I'd share that. Anyway, if you have any stories related to that and you'd like to share, I'd love to hear more about it. So anyway, that concludes this episode. We're still working on an episode about superstition. I'm still compiling stories for that. If you have any funny stories about, a certain pair of underwear that you wear on race day or whatever the thing is, I don't know. I don't know why I keep bringing underwear up. I guess that's just really funny to me because I know when I played baseball, I had a favorite undershirt that I would wear under my jersey. So funny stuff like that. Anyway, if you have any cool superstitions you want to share, lucky rabbit's foot or anything, that'll be fun. I'm trying to think of any upcoming events. I do have some exciting things coming up. I got interviewed on a podcast. I don't know if anybody heard it. It was on the BIB podcast, the Beginner Internet Business Podcast. I can link to that in the show notes. I was really honored to be part of it. I talked a little bit about the drag racing. I also talked about some other failed businesses and why you should be pursuing your passions, stuff like that. Just kind of fun. I know you guys don't listen to hear me talk about me, but here I am. It's my podcast, so what the heck. And here we are in my garage. That's what this space is. I've changed offices 3 or 4 times over the last year. Now I work remotely, so I work from home constantly, so I don't have an office, except we do have an office that I work in, but it's not really set up, not really conducive to doing the podcast, video podcast. So right now we're in the garage, and it's kind of cool. You can see the race car behind me, I can keep the carburetor on the desk here with me. So anyway, we're trying this out. Just bear with us if there's any technical, if the sound's a little off. We're still figuring it out. I'm also looking at trying to get some office space to do recordings of the podcast, so we'll get back to having that more academic look, because that's kind of what this is. I'm trying to be sort of academic here. Anyway, thanks again for listening. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for rating us. And keep on rolling. I hope you're having a great 2014 season. And just keep in touch. Race safe, race to win, and take care.